Welcome to this edition of At the Mic, the Thursday Deep Dive. I'm your host, Keith Malinak, and so grateful for you hanging out here with us on a Thursday afternoon. We do this every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Do the Friday Deep Dive. Today we're going to focus on the FBI here in just a moment. On Fridays, we just hang out, watch animal videos together. Tomorrow, I've got my old standby, Brad Staggs, hanging out along with Rebecca Mr. Eggen. I think that's how you pronounce it. She's in Norway. She was the guest on a Thursday Deep Dive, and we talked about the Islamization of Europe. She will be hanging out with us tomorrow on that. Okay. We're live exclusively on the X, the Twitter page, and then 8 o'clock Eastern on Thursdays and Friday nights. That's when it airs on YouTube and Rumble, if you would like to go over there. And I appreciate it if you could subscribe, click the little bell to get notified when we go live. And there's a random times, man. I don't know my availabilities, honestly, from one day to the next. So sometimes I'll go live randomly. So you want to click the bell here on Twitter as well to get the notifications. I know. I'm sorry that I can't be more consistent, but I am consistent on the Thursdays and Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern. So, youtube.com/atthemic. It's rumble.com/ I don't know, it's like user/atthemic show. Of course, Gabby handles the Instagram page, which is At the Mic Show. She's always adding stuff over there. So grateful for people like Gabby and for Wes, who he's constantly doing. He does the thumbnails, by the way. I'm grateful for him. He also makes sure that it shows up on those aforementioned locations, Spotify, iTunes. Anyway, so thank you to behind the scenes folks like Gabby and Wes. I'm so grateful, and I'm grateful for you as well. If you'd like to support the show, there's the Buy Me a Coffee link at the top of my Twitter page. It's there, okay? I'm not going to charge you a subscription. Besides, we've already been through this. I don't even know what I would offer on a subscription thing. What am I going to... I have no idea what I would do differently over there. More pictures of Matilda and Tanner, my dogs. Okay. So, I've got two awesome guests today, and I thought, I got to get these guys on together. And we're going to talk about the FBI. Because one of the more exciting elements of the Donald Trump administration when it came to appointments was Kash Patel heading up the FBI. I wanted that so badly. I was so excited when that became a reality. And then when he put Dan Bongino as his number 2, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is better than I could have ever fathomed. So now we're just a little more than 3 months in. On Tuesday will be day 100, I believe it is. Tuesday will be day 100 of the Donald Trump second term. And like you, I'm looking at the FBI and I'm thinking, okay, all right. I mean, give them some time, right? We're going to get there. We're going to get some awesome stuff. It's coming any day now. I'm going to just check my phone and there's going to be people in handcuffs. There's going to be all these indictments just coming out of the woodwork with all the charges. And man, those Epstein files too. Those are coming too. So here we are, and I'm getting a little concerned, getting a little antsy, and I've got questions, and I want to know when we're going to see some more stuff with substance, okay? But my guests today are going to either confirm the fact that I should be disappointed, or they're going to tell me to be patient. And I have no idea. I don't have a lot of. I've got some questions here, but I don't know what they're going to say. But I do know that Steve Friend, and he's got to be just exhausted with the whole, could you please stop introducing me as FBI whistleblower, Steve Friend. Steve is a former FBI agent who has this if you want to know what's going on at the FBI, yeah, it's the American Radicals podcast, available at Spotify and iTunes, Rumble. The American Radicals podcast, where Steve, you and Garrett, you spill the tea on what's really going on at the FBI. Well, you were there, and even today. So I appreciate you making time. I've had you on before where we've talked about the FBI during the last administration, I've had a lot of questions about the FBI. I've said I'm Mr. hashtag defund the FBI. I'm Mr. Look at how the FBI, just completely set this thing up. I can't stand the FBI. So I had new hope under this administration. And so I'm going to be asking you today, Steve Friend, if I should still have hope or if it's just more of the same. Now, another guy who is intimately familiar with the FBI is a coworker of mine over at The Blaze. His name is Steve Baker. Steve Baker has, you've had a run-in with the FBI that people may be aware of. You know what? I bet you're exhausted and tired of hearing people say, oh yeah, J6er, Steve Baker. But you're an investigative reporter. You've done some great stuff over there. You've got a 3-part series on the professional liar, Harry Dunn, and his role during January 6th. A lot of great stuff that you've written about with the FBI. So before we went on today, I said, you know what, guys? I think I'm going to introduce you. I'm going to walk out of the room for a couple of hours, and I'll come back and we'll wrap it up. Because I'm not needed here, and I appreciate y'all making time. So let's just, honestly, I don't know where to begin. And by the way, Steve, I'm so grateful that you're here and that your health is good. We will get into it at some point, the health issues that you've had for the last 5 weeks, man. But thank you for being here. Thank you for being alive. So, okay, let me just grab my first printed up thing here. Should we talk about this is a tweet from Steve Friend at Real Steve Friend on Twitter, and you see at Steve Baker USA. For I can't say Steve. I can't say Steve. I gotta say Friend and Baker today. So anyway, Steve Friend, you had a tweet a couple weeks ago. It says Stephen Jensen orchestrated the FBI's weaponized response to J6. His promotion is indefensible, no matter who is recruited to pimp the narrative. This is not 4D chess nor anything close to a good thing. Now, I've got some specific questions for you here coming up, gentlemen, but I wanted to start there because that seems kind of emblematic of maybe some red flags with this new and improved FBI, huh?
I'm waiting for the benign and innocent explanation for why that promotion was pushed on through, as we were reliably assured that we would get. I'm waiting for that as the same amount of time I'm waiting for the Epstein list, of course. For background, Stephen Jensen was the section chief of DTOS, which is the Domestic Terrorism Operations Section. He was the J6 warlord. By his own telling, he testified to this fact that he was in charge, the architect of the FBI's investigations and the way that those were brought forward for January 6th at large. It was the buck stops with him. He had counterparts at DOJ, but he testified to that fact. Now, after that, the FBI does what it loves to do with problem children, and that is send them over to the training division at Quantico, Virginia, where the new Agent Academy is. He spent some time there, was laundered effectively enough to be promoted to become the special agent in charge of the Columbia office in South Carolina. Pretty plum assignment. And then, now that we have a new director, new deputy director, I think they probably got some information from the people who are surrounding them or coiling around them like vipers, that this was a good man, a good company man with experience in national security. We could bring him in to become the ADIC, which is an actual term, the assistant director in charge of Washington Field Office, which is a very prominent position. He was elevated to that. So now you have promoted him. Now, originally, the pushback was that's New York Times, that's fake news. Well, unfortunately for those who pushed forward that, which was like Catturd and Gateway Pundit, the Suspendables, my buddies and I were able to produce the email that went around from Stephen Jensen to the Washington Field Office saying like, hey, I'm so grateful to be here and be your boss. And then immediately there was the pivot to this is fake news. Oh, no, it's real true news, but it's actually a good thing. And the simpers went out there and said that this was great because he clearly had made this bargain that he was promoted because he knows where the bodies are buried, which is ridiculous because from a case handling standpoint, he's like 5 derivatives removed from actually managing a case. He wouldn't know the intricacies of it. And what bodies do he know are buried? Does it mean that people who are above him? Because you don't work your way up the chain of command and get the lower level people. It will be higher level people. So he's Now parlay that into a promotion. Now, if he knows where the bodies are buried, let's say he knows that secretly Nancy Pelosi and Harry Dunn are besties and they plan the entire thing, then the deal that should be struck is, well, Stephen, you don't get to go to prison and you give us the information. Not you get promoted 2 times. Now, the Julie Kellers of the world went out and said that he knows where the bodies are buried. But by that logic, we should just make Christopher Wray the director of the FBI because he knows where the bodies are buried. We should just make Mayorkas the Homeland Security Secretary because he knows where the bodies are buried. That it doesn't stand up at all. And I think that they just spun like tops because they realized that well, when I say they, I think that leadership of the FBI realized that they made an and a mistake. And instead of saying, oh, I'm surrounded by a bunch of snakes coiling around me, there will be results. They just tried to pivot away and say, just trust us, give us some time.
You know, and Baker, I want to get you on this as well. But you just said something I wasn't going to get to until later on. But since you brought it up there, I printed up this tweet from, I was promoting this live stream earlier this week, and a gentleman by the name of Philip Kennedy, he tweeted, "From what I've seen so far, there was hardly any reason to get rid of Chris Wray." Thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Phil Kennedy's a friend of mine, and yes, he's a member of the Suspendables. He's not been as prominently spoken about because he has his own private affairs and he actually works for a living as opposed to me, who does content creation fantasy camp. But you're talking about a guy who was run off by the FBI in the same way that we all were. Actually was the longest tenured one of all of us. I think he has like 15 years of experience. So nobody's more disappointed than right. Phil Kennedy.
I see. Okay. So Steve, what are your thoughts on the Stephen Jensen situation there? Because I mean, you obviously have quite a connection to J6.
Well, first of all, it was naive on somebody's part to believe that they could send out an email, the one that Steve Friend referred to just a moment ago, to 2,500-ish employees in D.C. and not expect somebody to leak that email. Well, obviously, somebody did because the New York Times found out about it. And the New York Times wasn't even writing a story about that. It was just, it was literally embedded in a story like 7 or 8 paragraphs down of a list of things that are going on in D.C. And the thing that caught the New York Times eye was, this seems a little odd. And they literally approached it that way. It was like, okay, so this guy who we know was responsible for all of these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of J6, persecutions, however you want to couch it, has been promoted by MAGA for some reason, somehow, to be elevated to this new position over the Washington field office. Even the New York Times found that a little, well, I wouldn't say suspicious, but curious. So much so, I even got a call from one of the actual writers there at the New York Times, whose byline is included in that article. And
Alan?
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. Alan calls me and he goes, after it all broke, and everything, and he goes, will somebody just tell me what the F is going on here?
Oh, man.
And I told him, I said, well, it's MAGA versus MAGA, right now is what it is. It's an internal feud over this appointment, this elevation, this promotion of a guy, and then suddenly he's being defended and patted on the back and by those who only days before, maybe even hours before, would have ripped him a new asshole. But they turned on a dime because it was basically, it felt like the first thing I said, and I said this to Alan, I said, it feels like the cue. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, trust the plan. He goes, oh my God, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's trust the plan. Well, obviously, Steve and the other suspendables have their own unique sources related to the Bureau. And as a working journalist, I've been able to put together some of my own direct sources directly inside the Bureau. And I have been told, when this whole thing erupted here a few weeks ago, I was told directly from an inside source, on this very specific and actual reason that Jensen had been hired or promoted and moved back to WFO. And I was told that I can't say what it is because the reason itself would out my source if I even breathed the reason. So I've been sitting on this for several weeks now.
Wow.
I still haven't breathed or given breath or platform to the actual reason why he was brought in. But what it doesn't do, even, and I think the reason is total bullshit, by the way. But
well, then you answered my follow-up, which was going to be, are people like me going to be happy when all the truth comes out as far as what you're referring to?
No, because Steve said it perfectly a moment ago. He said it perfectly. If this guy has been sitting on this level of information for 4 years as an employee of the FBI,
I see.
Then that's you tell me, Steve. I mean, it's a crime. It's a crime for him to have been sitting on this information. And what should have been offered to him, as you said, was immunity from prosecution. And you get to go home and find another job somewhere doing something else, but not elevated to the head of the Washington field office. And that's what there's going to be no way anybody's going to be able to throttle me back from screaming that from, our bullhorn at the Blaze, if in fact this is what happens with this guy. And he has been elevated for the reason that I've been told he's been elevated. Now, trust the plan?
No?
I look, here's it's over the last couple of days, even they're talking about they're putting the pieces and the piece of the puzzle in play to make these arrests and reveal these things that we've been hoping to for the last several weeks since Cash and Dan have been promoted to director and deputy director, and we're sitting back here going, well, wait a minute, by this time in the J6 prosecutions, there was over 400 arrests had been made. They were swatting misdemeanor defendants with 25 agents with guns up. Nonviolent misdemeanor defendants, and they were worrying about building the case against them later. Am I right, Stephen?
Exactly right. I mean, look, you have other examples across the government at this point that you can compare it to. I mean, Scott Bessent over at Treasury has taken on the IRS. They're in the process of shutting down 110 out of 600 of these offices around the country. They're in the process of firing 7,000 probationary employees. They actually they elevated one of the whistleblowers, Gary Shapley, to become the acting commissioner of the IRS. And then you have Linda McMahon over at Department of Education, who's just basically like, I don't know, I'll turn out the lights and put a lock on the door. And that's kind of what her mandate is. Right. You're seeing those sorts of things happen, except where, in my humble opinion, where it matters the most, and that is at the DOJ and the FBI. You can't afford to be patient with these two because the stakes are just so high, because they have the ability through the force of law, through the force of a gun, to take away your freedom and potentially your life. We cannot go in, and this may be just a philosophical disagreement that we have with the director and the deputy director. I believe that they've gone in with the Afghanistan approach of, we're going to win hearts and minds because there are so many good men and women of the FBI. And that when they see the example we set, they will return to default settings and have rigorous obedience to the Constitution be the first and foremost and only concern, their prime directive. And we have a proof of concept with what happened in Afghanistan. That's an impossible achievement. They needed to go in with shock and awe and put heads on pikes. Metaphorically, I don't want to get you canceled. And fire significant numbers of people, which might include some good people. And then those people can reapply, or if they're good people, they can find gainful employment elsewhere. It's better to take too many people out and then also to pursue righteous prosecutions and investigations of the people who abused their positions of authority, because that was the mandate that was sent. And I don't see it happening right now. I'm waiting for the master plan to reveal itself. But looking up, and you mentioned before, we're almost at 100 days. My buddy Garrett O'Boyle has been indefinitely suspended forever by the FBI for 941 days, has 4 children, not a paycheck. That could be solved on day one. That doesn't take a process. That's a strike of a pen from the director or the deputy director. Put him on paid suspension. Do right by that guy. They could have done some other things like eliminating the intelligence branch. They could have eliminated the very quota system that I blew the whistle about that was wholly unnecessary and inappropriate. That's not a law. There's no legislation that came from Congress directing them to do that. That's internal. That could have been resolved. And we could have at least gotten a little bit of grace, a little bit of the down payment on the escrow to buy back some patience. Say, hey, look, we can't turn over the Epstein list to you. They promised it. They should have delivered. And instead, James Dennehy and the New York field office stepped to them and they melted away like a cardboard box in a rainstorm. But they could have said, we have a task force. We're investigating 300 people on that list like we did to January 6th. And give us one name if need be. Or they could have opened up the books on other things that would have not compromised ongoing investigations, like what the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is the victim of, and that's the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination plot.
Right.
Why hasn't that been turned over? Just little things that could be done right away. And instead, we're getting hearts and minds. We're getting pictures with hostage rescue team. We're getting press releases that I cover down on all the time. The big one that happened last night was we're very excited that we have arrested this huge leader, a member of Tren de Aragua, and you get a statement from the director of the FBI about how they're standing in the gap and protecting the American people. And then you read the press release and it says that Colombian officials arrested him and he's in their custody. And this is a process that takes 18 to 24 months, which means it started under the Biden administration.
Right. And by the way, you did a great job in yesterday's show, American Radicals podcast, and you're doing it here. You actually read the press releases, whereas the FBI hopes you just see the post and go, oh, they got this guy on a federal. I want to go through some of these headlines, but it's like you take 2 seconds to read their press releases. You go, why the hell did they even tweet that out? Like, what are we doing here?
It briefs well, man. They're talking about people who their entire existence is based on, does it brief well? Can I make a PowerPoint slide with it, with the bullet points, and then we're on to the next thing? And if they're relying on people being of similar mindset, because the press releases are often like 2 or 3 paragraphs long. I mean, I'm not reading through any like a Dickens novel. Right. Paragraph 2, and it says, according to the court documents, and then you read 3 sentences and realize, oh, the FBI didn't do anything.
I've got 2 specific questions for you, Steve Friend. Have you or Garrett O'Boyle or anyone you know that that was formerly with the FBI, good people like yourself, have you gotten so much as a phone call from the new administration?
No.
Would you even go back at this point if you were called in and said, hey, we want you to come back, please, same position, whatever? I mean, would you even go back at this point?
Well, if you asked me a couple months ago, I probably would have given you a different response, because I have no desire to live in Washington, D.C. I was under maybe the misconception that if I got a phone call, it would be something to that regard, like, hey, we need to get you to be the voice in the room here to say, like, hey, maybe we should say no to this really bad idea. But now, if an offer were put out there, it would probably be in the form of, do you want to go back to doing your old job, which was a fulfilling job, but at the same time, I'd be working for the exact same human being who walked me out of the office, which might create a little static. I mean, it'll be fun for 20 minutes to roll in and be like, I'm not doing whatever you tell me again. But then I'd have a target on my back for the foreseeable future, because I need to do another 10 and a half years. So the odds of me making it to a retirement age would be slim to none. And, I'm also, though, in the Richard Gere officer and a gentleman situation, like, I have nowhere else to go. I have a decade and a half of law enforcement experience, and I am unemployed and unemployable seemingly at this point. Like, I've put in applications recently to a car wash near where I live and got rejected. The mark that is left on you, because all you have to do is Google my name, and any employer is like, it's just not worth it. I got 25 people behind him who can do that job. I'm just going to move on and find somebody else. I've applied for law enforcement jobs and been told the exact same thing. Like, it's just, we can't touch you at this point. You're radioactive. So then I'm in a difficult position. Then I'm in a compromised position that I'm always railing against, because you have this job and it's the only job you can do. So maybe the resolution would be, we don't want you, and they're fine. If they don't want me, it's not my circus, man. I'm happy to be a resource for them. I don't have to be a W-2 employee to do that. Just I can be a texting buddy with you. But we need to have a bookend for all of us, because if you don't, it's very clear then that regardless of who the director of the FBI is, regardless who the Attorney General, regardless of the President of the United States, if you come forward with a reasonable concern of waste, fraud, or abuse, a risk to the public safety, a violation of rule, policy, law, or procedure, and you embarrass the Bureau, your life and your future potential earning prospects, your career is destroyed forever. That message will be solidified. It will have a chilling effect, but that might be actually what they want at this point. From what
I'm so angry for you, and I cannot even for 5 seconds imagine what it's like to be in your shoes. By the way, you are an author. People want to go and find your book at Amazon. Look for Steve Friend's book. How can people support you and help you? I mean, is there a fund? Is there something? Because this is what I want, actually. I want you to get rehired, like you said, for 20 minutes, just long enough to go down to HR to collect your back paycheck. And then you could go ahead and walk right out.
Back pay would be nice. Yeah. I mean, maybe a medical retirement. I mean, like I haven't slept in 2.5 years. That could be medical.
There you go.
But is there a way to help out you and your family, man?
Right now, I mean, we're just doing the content creation. So, if you enjoy my perspective on things, the American Radicals podcast is really the only game that I have going right now. So that's available Rumble. We do it 3 days a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, but you could always catch up if you miss it, 10:30 on Rumble. And it also streams on iTunes and Spotify and iHeart. And, our emblem, it looks like the Hamilton emblem, except he's got an AR-15 over his head. So,
that's so good. Okay, so Steve Baker, my coworker over at The Blaze, I want to start this question with you. I honestly don't know if you have any updated information, if you've heard anything. And then Steve Friend, if you could weigh in as well. Again, I don't know that you'll have any information on this, but you mentioned there, Steve Friend, when you were talking about the guy at you were referencing the Southern District of New York FBI field office, correct, with the Epstein files?
James Dennehy.
Okay, thank you. So has there been any movement that you guys have heard of on the Epstein file front? Earlier this week, the president was asked in the Oval Office. He said, "Oh, you know what? I need to talk to AG Bondi about that. Let me get some information for you on that." So I guess my question is more of a larger. And we'll start with you, Baker. Have you heard any update on that? And then I want to ask you guys: do you think that the hang-up is still at the FBI field office in New York? Do you think the hang-up is at the FBI down in D.C.? Or do you think the hang-up is the White House itself? Any thoughts on this?
The answer to your question is very simple. It has nothing to do really with the hang-up or the bottleneck being New York FBI office or the DC FBI office. The hang-up has to do with the politics itself. The politics means that the names on the list, and not just the names, but the underlying investigations behind all the people that they have names of, is so toxic to both parties. It's going to be held up forever. Yeah. I mean, look how long we waited on JFK's files to come out, and it's the nature of the beast and why nothing gets done in the first place. I mean, we tend to be, we have our own little village. You've got Hillary's village over here, and then you got, the Trump's village over here. And we've got the two-party system. You see the things from the left or the right with some little, a shading of colors in between. But the reality is that the corruption runs so deep on both sides that until you realize that when they, look, it's always been said, and we've all heard that it's not a cliche, it's true. Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, my favorite author, Frank Herbert, who wrote Dune, he actually postulated that it's actually goes one step deeper than that. It's that power attracts the corruptible. And that's the tough part. That doesn't mean 100% of every single person that goes to DC goes there with a corrupt heart, mind, soul, but they are corruptible, most of them, and they fall into the trap. And it can be as innocent as insider trading. You know, you see the legislation that's coming, and you could get, honey, you need to buy so many shares of XYZ, you know, and then 10 years later, on a $180,000 annual income, you're worth, $130 billion or what, $130 million. What you're like, how did that happen? Well, that's how it happens. And then it gets much worse than that, because if we're talking about the Epstein files, we're talking about, sexual deviancy, or at least, whether they're sleeping with underage kids or having sex with underage kids or not, it shows that they're stepping out on their spouses probably, and B, particularly if they're God, family, and country Republican GOP, waving that banner, then they're stepping out on their professed morals, as and they're going to do everything they can to stop that list from coming out.
Oh boy, yeah. Steve Friend, thoughts?
I avow just about everything that Steve Baker said there. I think the compromised aspect to it is something that's not even just limited to the elected officials. You have members of the bureaucracy itself who are compromised as well. I mean, and it doesn't even have to extend to anything salacious. And the fact of the matter is, most people that I encountered within government service were financially compromised. Mm-hmm. You have to fill out the financial disclosure so the FBI and the federal government knows where you are on things. Yeah. And they can easily present something to you like, well, you sure you want to say no to this directive that we're giving you, even though it's out of step with your oath of office? You're owe alimony, and you got kids in college, and you got 2 mortgage payments going on. You just bought a boat last year. You sure you want to do that? And I'm not directly quoting exactly a person who I worked with, but that's legion. And then just specifically to the Epstein list, I think that's been built up as something, and I think rightfully so. But at the same time, it would be healthy to recognize that knowing who is on the Epstein list would not change anybody on this panel's life, anybody in the audience's life at all. I mean, I don't know, maybe Bill Gates is watching at the mic, but what would change your life significantly is knowing that the federal law enforcement apparatus that has that possession of that is actively pursuing the people on it in a fashion that we deem to be acceptable, in a judicious manner and as quickly as possible, and making sure that they're going to present a buttoned up prosecution of the offenders on that list. But we haven't got that. Instead, we got a promise of, we're just going to hand over the list. And then not only did it not happen, it didn't happen in a fashion that was very clear that the hearts and minds are not winnable from significant swaths of the FBI, because James Dennehy was forced to retire, meaning he gets his full pension. He wasn't fired for cause. He got to retire. He walked out with a bagpipe and honor guard ceremony to the thralls of hundreds of employees, standing ovations. You tell me that is an agency that is prepared to have an overhaul possible? I'm now at a point where I'm back to where I was, where it's, all right, we're going to maybe do a renovation. Maybe it's possible. I don't think so anymore. I think it's a demolition. You can't put a new coat of paint on this thing and say, oh, well, we'll change the top to all it's necessary. Everybody's going to snap back to what we thought that they could do, because really at its core, it never was doing what people believed it did. In the recent episode that you alluded to on American Radicals podcast, I pulled up the pilot episode of The FBI, which aired on ABC from 1965 to 1974. And the final 30 seconds of that episode was how they close out every show. And that is with the main protagonist driving his FBI convertible Mustang, which would have been awesome. And they close out and they throw up the emblem of the FBI. The producers of the show want to say a special thanks to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover and his associates. That's the misconception that was put forward that everybody has in their head of, oh, that's what the FBI really does. When really the FBI, for its entire existence, has essentially been about preserving the status quo for the swamp, for the one big club that we ain't all in. And they're the teeth on the attack dog to go after anyone who wants to disrupt that. So if you want to be disruptive to that and push things like, oh, we want civil rights, well, then we'll send the FBI out against you and we'll go spy on MLK. Oh, we don't believe in sending off 18 to 22-year-old men to die in the swamps of Vietnam. Well, we're going to send the FBI against you. Or, we kind of don't like the overarching government pressure on people. We kind of want to have our own homestead. Well, we can't have that. So Ruby Ridge, here you go. We're going to send the hostage rescue team there. And then this evolution has gone more and more and more, and particularly ramped up post 9/11, post Patriot Act, and we gave all the tools to the national security apparatus. And I've come around to comparing what we see with our current federal law enforcement capability, particularly in the FBI, to Skynet from Terminator, because Skynet from Terminator is artificial intelligence, not good, not bad, just is ones and zeros. And when Skynet becomes self-aware, it comes to the conclusion that its enemy is anyone who will unplug it, who will turn it off. So therefore, Skynet turns against the humans. And then we got 2 good movies, and then the rest we want to forget actually about. Flash that forward to September 12th, 2001, when we armed the bureaucracy of the FBI with the Patriot Act, with the mission set. But it's a bureaucracy, self-looking ice cream cone, justify its existence.
Yeah.
Inevitably, it will evolve its mission set. And it'll do it slow enough and through good PR to make you think that it's doing good work. But eventually, it'll stop looking for legitimate bad actors and evolve it into whoever is going to be bad for the bureaucracy. The goal of bureaucracy is to grow in material, funding, and personnel and capabilities. So if you don't like that, we'll just target you as a terrorist and come after you, which is what we saw under the Biden administration.
Before we leave the Epstein idea, let's look at a couple of uncomfortable realities about this. I mean, first of all, if you're just on Jeffrey Epstein's personal plane's flight list, that's not a crime. Okay. You start there. So then the investigation has to go beyond that. Where were you going? What were you doing? Did you get videotaped sleeping with underage women on his island, et cetera, et cetera? And there may or may not be evidences of these incidences taking place. And if you're 70-something-year-old Bill Clinton and you're on the plane and you're flying to Epstein's island and you're banging a 18, 21-year-olds or whatever, it's still not a crime.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a crime. May not look good, in your PR office, but it's still not a crime.
Yeah.
You can be. Well, for instance, here in North Carolina, the age of consent is 16. So you can be a 78-year-old crusty, a vile, slobbering senator who can barely, put a sentence together anymore, and you can have a relationship with a 16-year-old, and it's not a crime.
Yeah.
So I would imagine of all the people on that list, there's going to be a lot of them just that are like, they're waiting for the bad PR battle, but there's not going to be charges filed. There's a lot of loopholes in there. You're talking about sexual crimes. And obviously there are some girls who have come forward and who have talked about being used and trafficked, marketed when they were underage. But it's going to be a very, very, let's just say that the high expectations of this file being released are not going to be satisfied.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. But what sucks is that you have an administration that made this big deal, and wrote a check that their mouth can't cash, or what's the saying? Anyway, did I get that right?
Your mouth's right to check, your body can't catch.
Thank you. That's it. Something like that. Anyway, so I totally screwed that one up. Have you ever been to Idaho, state of Idaho, Steve Friend? It's lovely. It's one of my favorite states.
Nope. I live in Florida, the land of milk and honey.
Okay. Well, Ryan Duvall has a proposal. You should move to is it Kootenai County? Did I get that right, Ryan? You could be voted in as sheriff. So
there you go,
bro. If I had your background, just all things being equal, that is a tempting offer. It's so lovely up there. Anyway, you should think about it. It's not nearly as humid as Florida, Steve Friend.
Perish the thought. That's blasphemy. I live in Daytona. There's no humidity. There's no mosquitoes. The only thing you have are alligators, and they keep California away.
Right.
Oh, crap. We need something in Texas. That's too late for us. But in hindsight, we need something. Rattlesnakes. They've got those in California. No. Got to think of something. Okay, gentlemen, I guess let's start with you first on this one. I guess Steve Baker. I've gotten my order out of. I'm messed up now. Talk to us about George Hill and Brian Auten. I'm specifically referring to. Oh, it's Phil. I didn't even realize this. It's Phil Kennedy again. The Bureau's MAGA media mouthpieces were recently more upset about an analyst named George Hill than the one named Brian Auten.
You want me to jump in on that one?
Either one. I don't care.
I mean, obviously, Steve Friend is more aware and intimately engaged with these guys. But let me tell you, as an honorary suspendable, which I do wear that badge with honor and have worn it prominently in some very interesting circumstances.
You're not honorary. You're officially. We don't beat you into the gang, Steve. It's fine.
but the point being is that one of the most disturbing issues about this, it's come up a couple of times. It's manifested itself here in this Jensen promotion, but it came up the first time in the Mar-a-Lago raid was when the suspendables, myself included, thank you, Steve, we just said, wait a minute, hold on. This is not quite the shootout at the Mar-a-Lago corral. This is not an assassination attempt. And we had huge influencers, huge podcasters, including Bongino, including Bannon, literally saying, and I'm not exaggerating when I say the word, that they believed that it was an assassination attempt. Now, this is it's so absurd because you're telling me that neither the Secret Service or the FBI knew that Trump and his family were in New Jersey that morning? Really? So you have to suspend all intelligence in order to make that assertion. And that's what they led with. That's what they went forward with. It's what we call rage porn. It was clickbait, rage porn to the nth degree. And a major influencer fanned the flames of that by taking and putting 3 or 4 little clips out of the search warrant, flipped them out, didn't publish the whole 16 pages, and posted just those 3 or 4 little clips that were inflammatory, talking about use of force and that the FBI operates under in every search warrant, thousands and thousands and thousands of them, and made it look like that this was a special deal where these agents were riding in specifically to incite a gun battle with the Secret Service protective detail, and then they were going to overrun them and assassinate Trump, I guess, or at least sniff, his wife's panties, whatever the case may be.
And you're talking about the search warrant is a cut and paste, right? If I remember correctly, because both you gentlemen, and this is one of the reasons why you guys are such great follows on Twitter at Steve Baker USA, at Real Steve Friend. I remember that morning, Steve Friend, you two guys are some of the only people that I know who are awake as early as I am. And it's a lonely world.
We have to do perimeter checks, wait on the SWAT team.
That is so good. That is awesome. 3 a.m. alarm clock for me, and I barely make it that far. My brain wakes me up. But you guys, and I'm so grateful, and I mean this sincerely, I'm so grateful for your texts before the show or during the show. My day job producing Pat Gray Unleashed comes on 7 a.m. Eastern on The Blaze. And I remember that morning, Steve Friend, making sure I wasn't going to fall into the trap of, hey, this is this is just a pre-made doc. This is this verbiage is on every single thing. And so, to your point, Steve Baker, it wasn't quite what many were trying to make it seem like it was. Like, oh my gosh, they're going in guns a-blazing to kill Trump and his family.
And that's what I did. So I went straight to our editor in chief there at the Blaze, and I said, we can't let this stand. All right, we either need to address it in an article, or we can address it. I'll do it in an X thread, and I'll post the entire document, the entire search warrant. And the emphasis on that was, and I didn't name names. I didn't call out Bongino or Julie Kelly or anybody else or Bannon. I didn't name any names. But all I did was emphasize that section of the search warrant is template. It's already pre-printed.
Template. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to fill in. I mean, there's a lot of blanks and things that are specific to that event or that warrant. But when it comes to use of force, this is the same language used in every arrest or execution that they make in the bureau, and so this was not something unusual that they concocted so that they could have that shootout at the Mar-a-Lago Corral. And so I got in as much trouble as the rest of the guys did for taking that side. And it wasn't taking a side. It was like everybody just pull back for a second. You have to dismiss a lot. And the other thing in the not template area of this was that we knew if they had posted, the influencers had posted or read the entire 16-page document, they would have seen that the FBI and the Secret Service were already in communication 3 days in advance before the raid. So this wasn't a surprise raid. It was like, seriously. And I'm giving these guys a lot of grace because I still don't agree. And I've always said this. I don't agree that the guy should have gone in.
Right. And that's not what we're arguing here.
That was the lost opportunity. I mean, because they honed in on the rage porn, like Steve Baker just said. Right. There was so much to point out there. Yeah. And look, it's called an FD 888. Right? That's the operations plan that goes for any sort of search warrant, arrest warrant. But it is stating the policy that is in effect all the time. If you're going to do an interview, if you are doing surveillance, if you're in the office, if you're home on your couch watching Netflix and you're an agent of the FBI, the exact same Department of Justice use of force policy applies. It's not a kill authorization. Okay? It is law enforcement officers of the Department of Justice may use deadly force when they have a reasonable belief that the threat exists of death or serious bodily injury to themselves or to another person. And the reason that they put it into the FD 888 is that if you get into a shooting, they're going to ask you, when was the last time that you were briefed on the use of force? And that way they can CYA themselves and be like, well, we briefed him that morning.
Yeah.
Just so you know, just so we were all sure. But the lost opportunity specifically to the Mar-a-Lago raid was they treated the president like any other search warrant, which I'm sure they say, well, we have equal justice under the law. No, we don't. The president doesn't operate in the same circumstances that anybody in this panel does. And there were other elements of it that could have been raised that I tried to bring to the attention of the Julie Kellys of the world and say, look, this isn't where you need to go. Where you need to go on it is the fact that the counterintelligence squad from the Washington field office was investigating Donald Trump, and they executed a search warrant in Mar-a-Lago, which is outside of their territory, which if it was just a regular old search warrant because everybody gets treated the same, why are they flying the entire squad down there? Why are they flying the hostage rescue team down there? flying the counterintelligence squad down there when the special agent in charge of the Miami field office at the time, George Pirro, you would think would want his people to do it. I mean, certainly he would want to get involved in that. That's a career sort of operation. But he said no. Well, could it be because George Pirro had been demoted and sent down to Miami because he was compromised? He was demoted because he was caught in a state of undress, receiving fellatio from a subordinate in a bureau car. Maybe that could be something you could hang your hat on. Why was the hostage rescue team taken down there? Was it because they were expecting to take fire from the Secret Service? Or is it because they wanted the most squared away tactical team that the FBI has down there because they don't trust their own people to not get into a shooting? So they want to make sure that the tier 1 asset is down there. There's all these other things that you could do, but that didn't do. And we're like so derailed from the Brian Auten thing. We bring it back to that, right?
This is what I told you guys at the beginning of the show. I should have just walked out at
George Hill.
2 hours.
George Hill, fellow suspendable, retired supervisory intelligence analyst from the FBI, was also with the NSA, United States Marine Corps, United States Navy, 35 years under a polygraph, top secret clearance. Okay, extremely squared away. Brought forward a whistleblower allegation to the Weaponization Committee, to Jim Jordan, actually before the Weaponization Committee, but it gave a sit-down deposition to them, provided them with information that the Bank of America provided a list to the FBI, unsolicited, no subpoena, no search warrant, a list of all of their clients who were in and around the capital region on January 6, 2021, and also had used a Bank of America product that day, and also had used a Bank of America debit card, credit card to buy a firearm, and handed it over to the FBI. That's George Hill. And when he was talking, that's primarily what he was discussing with Jim Jordan and all the other congressional representatives. And then at one point, he mentioned Stephen Jensen, who we talked about before, being the warlord of the January 6th investigation. And he said Stephen Jensen was giving these twice daily briefings in the immediate aftermath of January 6th and was very excited about it and had remarked at some point like that all the people were GD terrorists. And then we started going into the op, very much like we did with Mar-a-Lago, where we said it was a kill order, and we're going to talk about that. And anybody who disputes that needs to be dismissed because they're really a secret Fed, which is what Julie Kelly said about me and my friends. Tell it to Garrett O'Boyle, who's been suspended for 941 days without a paycheck.
Oh, by the way, Steve, this crossed my mind earlier when you were talking about, employment opportunities. Have you thought about, becoming a CHS? Really?
Man. Some of them make like high six figures.
That's I know.
Well, unlike the CNN worries about former feds, I'm not going to hand over sensitive information to the Russians. So that's kind of out of play here. So George Hill tells him that. Immediately we pivot to Stephen Jensen doesn't use profanity. That's how we know that George Hill is not reliable. He was not reliable, was not in dispute is facts and evidence that Stephen Jensen,
right.
Yeah, we have too many Steves. Stephen Jensen was promoted to the ADIC of the Washington field office. That is beyond dispute. But we pivoted away from that to he doesn't use naughty language. So that was the op that went on there. And compared George Hill, you have to doubt everything that he's brought forward, which is all substantiated by evidence. And we're more concerned about George Hill than Brian Auten, who self-deployed as an analyst, not an agent, to Europe in furtherance of the Russiagate scandal.
Yeah, a guy who's a former sailor who cusses like a sailor. Yeah, that should discount anything else that he brings forward or says about any case if he uses profanity on that. Yeah, that was the same thing. But this is what we went from Mar-a-Lago to this situation with Jensen, and the thing that
players every time,
right? But the thing that shocks me. And I feel bad I feel worse for, the rest of the guys, the suspendables, the actual whistleblowers who have sacrificed in order to bring the information and bring and shine a light on the failings of any government agency for that matter. But the reality is to see how the same people who defended them, who said to them, "We will make you whole." These were public statements that they're going to make them whole. And now they have turned on them completely, just simply because we saw this one, or we asked this one question and said, wait a minute, you're promoting this guy. Why? And all they had to do is just tell us why. Just tell us if there's a reason for this, just tell us, because not a single one of you would have supported this promotion 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. You would have been screaming bloody murder from every platform that you appear on.
Just so the motto of the FBI is fidelity, bravery, integrity. It's now changed to just trust me, bro.
Oh man. Okay.
So. And don't attack my friends for us just saying what you're saying, because that, even that has come up today, just in the last 24 hours, is that now the guys are being blamed for criticizing Bongino for his past words. No, we're just playing his statements that he's made in the past.
I'm a big fan of what he said.
Yeah.
I'm a proponent of it. I put my reputation out there as a public advocate on behalf of Kash Patel and Dan Bongino to get the positions they do. I want those things to happen. Yeah. They're not happening, and I'm being told to just trust me, bro. But we're not in a timeline now where we can afford to be patient.
So you obviously have friends on the inside, Steve, that I'm sure you're in communication with. Is there anything that you're hearing from those on the inside of the FBI that are working every day in the J. Edgar Hoover building that should give us reason to think, hang in there, it's going to get better. Trust me, bro. Like, is there anything that we could have some hope for here?
So from inside headquarters, I'm hearing that some things are moving in a positive direction at the speed of government, which means we'll see you next decade. And then I'm hearing from the field that nothing has changed in their day-to-day operations at all. Morale is back through the floor, except for the communists that are entrenched there and ensconced there because they have the momentum. They have all the momentum, and most federal workers lick their finger, put it in the air, see where the wind is going, because they have to protect their job. And they will back whoever has the momentum. And at this point, it is the James Dennehy's of the world, the people who felt comfortable walking outside and applauding a guy who was forced to resign after rejecting a directive from the Attorney General of the United States of America and the FBI director. And other guys have been promoted. Other people have been, Brian Driscoll, who was the accidental acting director after Christopher Wray left before Kash Patel was appointed to become the director of the FBI. Brian Driscoll, who was ordered to hand over the list of everybody who had worked on January 6th and said no. He was not only not removed as acting director, not only sent back or even demoted, not fired, he's been promoted again. Now he's an assistant director.
Way back several conversation points earlier, Steve Friend was talking about, this idea of they seem to be wanting to, win over the hearts and the minds of the enemy, like we did in Afghanistan, that was the war plan inside the FBI as well. And that suddenly after winning them over, these people would suddenly offer their fealty to the Constitution and to their oath. And no, the vast majority of them only have fealty to their paycheck and then getting in their years for their government pension. That's ultimately what it is. And so they're going to whoever they're answering to. And of course, nobody's been replaced yet. So they're answering to the same people, as Steve pointed out. They're answering to the same Marxists and cultural Marxists that they were answering to before. And that's the one thing that we were promised was going to happen, is that decapitation strategy was going to happen and they were going to be removed. And it's not happening. And they're not telling us why. They're just saying, trust the plan, or He said, "Trust me, bro." And that's what's most frustrating for those of us who have been rooting for Bongino and rooting for Kash Patel,
Right.
and who have actually had relationships with them to some level. I've never had a deep relationship with either of them, but I've spoken to both of them. Bongino used to highlight my work. He won't mention me anymore since the Mar-a-Lago thing. And Kash Patel, I was introduced to him by our big boss. I mean, Glenn Beck himself introduced me to Kash and said, and I had a new investigative piece that had just come out that morning, and Glenn said, go print off your article real quick and come bring it over here. And he introduced me to Kash, and Kash and I exchanged phone numbers right there, and then we ended up having some conversations. But I doubt he would take my call today, because he certainly has to be aware that I'm doing my job as a journalist. I'm just saying, what's up, man? Just tell us. It's not that hard. Don't come out and do a press conference, or don't send your number 2 man out for 5 days in a row with a "just trust me, bro, follow the plan" tweet, because that's all we got. Once the Jensen controversy erupted, that's all we got for days on end. Trust me, bro.
Cool.
Frustrating, you know.
It sure as hell is. And I keep reshuffling the order of my questions now, because you guys keep make this point. I'm like, I want to talk about this. I want to go there. So let's just stay in that vein of business as usual. And maybe this isn't as big of a red flag, but I think it says something. And I'm referring to Steve Friend's American Radicals podcast yesterday, where you went through all of these press releases, these publicly available press releases under the new regime. And in this, I'm sure it's been going on forever, where the FBI takes credit for local law enforcement accomplishments and they write up a little blurb, a little press release, and they find some threat. I mean, some of the federal connections are laughable to make them fall under, I guess, any sort of purview of the FBI. But I guess, let's see here. Just give us a thumbnail sketch, because I want people to check out episode 201 of American Radicals podcast and get the full story on all these. But just give us a thumbnail as to some of these stories that you highlighted. Like, tell us what happened in Greenville, South Carolina.
Armed Greenville fentanyl distributor sentenced to 11 years in prison. So we have an armed person who was dealing fentanyl, which we were assured that was like 250,000 Americans died from last year. So looked into that one, again, according to the documents. And I got my notes here. Let's see. Oh, yeah, that's right. He robbed a convenience store, as in common vernacular, the colloquialism for a convenience store in cop jargon is a stop and rob. So he robbed the stop and rob for $1,500 in 2023. And then he got into a pursuit with local deputies. He winds up getting away and then gets arrested 4 months later out of state by another police department. And when they arrest him, they find counterfeit oxycodone pills in his possession. So armed robbery, a couple months later, arrested on that warrant by another police department. And the FBI adopts it and takes it because he went across state lines. He used
state lines.
Yeah. And
so that makes it a federal case.
Sure. It's a year and a half old.
Tell us about the DC case. A guy gets 10 days in the connection with Judge Boasberg. We know him.
Judge Boasberg sentenced him. The politically correct title of the DOJ, and this is the Pam Bondi DOJ, was that a protester was sentenced in damaging U.S. government property at Union Station following a protest rally. So a rioter rioted, and he winds up taking down a flag, spray painting Hamas on a statue, gets arrested. It's all on camera, all on social media. Judge Boasberg, of course, handles it and sentences him to a misdemeanor 10 days in jail when he I think, did more than Steve Baker, and Steve was facing far more significant amount of time than that.
Right. Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna tell you right now that on a daily basis, and this has been going on for well over a year or two. Anyway, my favorite tweets to read every day are coming from Mr. Steve Friend on this exact topic. I mean, this is
I've devoted my entire social media presence to that. That's why I make the big bucks, gents. $28.
There you go. That'll probably actually highlighting those probably are insuring your
$28
limited reach.
Referring to what exactly, Steve Friend?
Oh, I'm like Elon. He's letting the cash flow.
I know. That's another deep dive we got to do on the X algorithm. Okay. I love the story out of Boston, Steve Friend, that you highlighted on episode 201 of the American Radicals podcast.
The moped guy.
Tell us how that became a federal case.
Guy who's driving a moped, speeding, and he doesn't have a license plate because he probably doesn't think that he has to have it for a street vehicle, right? So police light him up, blue lights, and he tries to run one of the cops over. He winds up laying the moped down and fighting with the cops. And when they fight with him, they find a gun on him. So I mean, don't want to limit the danger here. Like cop could have been run down by a moped, armed criminal, but he's apprehended. Then it's over.
It sounds like a local case.
Yeah, well, but he's a prohibited person. So 18 United States Code 922G, it lays out the people who are prohibited from having a firearm, and he fits that standard. So ergo, they charge him with having an illegal weapon, and they claim that the title was Boston Man Pleads Guilty to Federal Firearms Offense.
And of course, the FBI puts out a press release and makes it look like, oh, they're hard at work stopping all these bad guys. And it was nothing but okay. Rhode Island bank robber.
No. So if you want to do this yourself, go to the FBI Boston X handle because they continually put this stuff out. They're one of my favorite. They're my go-tos. This guy, he was robbed a bank and then he got like $2,500, I think, is what he winds up getting. And then, so I have here, courting information presented, private citizen follows him out of the bank, gets the license plate, like an actual brave person, reports it. Massachusetts State Police see the vehicle, they pursue it, they throw down the stop spikes to penetrate the tires to make him wreck, and then they arrest him like their day of. And it's been on the books for 3 fiscal years as a bank robbery. Massachusetts State Police handled it that day. Guy's been in custody the entire time, and robbing a bank is a federal crime. But my purpose at large is to say, like, what is stopping a Massachusetts State Police trooper from walking over to a United States Attorney's office and saying, hey, I have a bank robber. Here's the evidence. We pursued him. We got him. We found him with the actual money. Can you charge him? And instead they say, no, you have to take it to the FBI, who does the office space, and says, you take the physical file and you bring it to the attorneys? Yes, that's what I do. Get paid $135,000 a year to do it, too.
Oh, gosh. Okay. One last question for you, Steve Friend, from yesterday's American Radicals podcast. Explain, why is the FBI connected to Iran now?
Well, it shows you what the purpose of all these press releases are, and that's to generate the good PR. They're hoping that you're not going to actually read the press release. Now, that one that they put out, and they do it all the time. If we're fighting, we're helping Ukraine fight Russia, then all of a sudden they'll indict a Russian. Now, if there's a problem with China, then we'll indict a Chinese person. So now we're getting ready for World War III. We're going to go fight with Iran. So the FBI put out a very long press release. They indicted these 2 Iranians for providing material support to the IRGC and also taking drone technology and providing it to the Iranian government. So we have a counterterrorism angle because of the IRGC, and we have a counterintelligence angle because that's proprietary information. And they do this and indict them for it. Meanwhile, they're operating in Iran, Iranian men living in Iran, and will never, ever be arrested because they're not going to be extradited to us. But we have untold amounts of manpower and hours, billable hours spent on this so we can get the press release and the FBI can get in on the Iranian conflict.
Uh-huh. Oh, good
And
stuff.
But what did we vote for last November?
Oh, no.
We didn't vote for any of this.
Uh-huh.
We all had a much bigger picture, a much larger picture. And in fact, we have, reams and reams or miles and miles of recorded, tape. We don't have tape anymore, but you know what I mean? We have gigabytes worth of recordings of the people running the agencies now promising us what they were going to do and what they were going to set straight if we gave them their vote and if they got the power and if they were appointed to the heads of these agencies. And we're still waiting.
What we're experiencing now is exactly what we convinced ourselves, at least speaking for myself, this time it's different. This time it's going to be different. And if ever it was going to be different, this is the time. And I believe, I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan, and I know that we'll never win the Super Bowl, but I've made peace with that. And that was before 28-3.
28-3.
Before that happened, I knew we would never win the Super Bowl.
Do you still have a good Dirty Bird dance, Keith?
Oh gosh, I don't know that you want to see me.
I was living in Georgia when that was happening.
That's been 27 seasons ago. I don't know. Where's Jamal Anderson when you need? Anyway, so okay, and it just feels like, are we seriously? Have we been fooled again? We got the people. It wasn't we got the party in power that we wanted. We got the people, the exact people to run these departments. These were who we were campaigning and tweeting about. Please make this happen. And now it's like, oh my gosh, is this happening to us again? Is this like we assembled the team? And really, is this going to happen? Yes. I don't know.
Well, Steve Friend hit on it by a couple of statements he made earlier. I mean, the first thing is, rightfully so, we see them moving at the speed of government. Well, that's never efficient or at the pace that any of us would want it to happen. But the second and most important thing that he alluded to or much earlier on this discussion is if we're talking about the FBI, and we are talking about the FBI today specifically as an agency, there may be no clearer, better defined government agency than the FBI in terms of its cultish culture. There is a cultishness about that culture at the FBI, and it's going to be very, very difficult to break. And so if I'm going to give, the director and the deputy director any grace whatsoever, they are up against a deeply entrenched cult.
Yes.
And that's going to be tough. Now, Steve Friend can speak more to that than I can, but that's what you're up against.
And I want to set up Steve Friend for this response, because I'm going to make another football analogy. It's like the Bill Walsh coaching tree, because the last time I had Steve Friend on, we've had him on a couple of 3 times now to talk about, the absurdities of the FBI. And it's just frustrating as hell that I have you on during this administration talking about the frustrations of the FBI. But one of the things that you said in one of those episodes, which, by the way, all of the deep dives, every episode that I've ever done is pinned in an article at the top of the Twitter feed. Just click on that and find the date. But the episodes with Steve, well, either Steve, are awesome. But Steve Friend, you said, this has really stuck with me, that the J. Edgar Hoover, and by the way, my Calvin Coolidge picture here, I mean, he didn't make many mistakes. But he didn't give us...
He hired a librarian to be in charge of federal law enforcement. I think he was going for a light touch.
Okay, right? So we're not going to blame Silent Cal on this one. But the point you made in that conversation that has resonated with me is that it's a culture that, in other words, the acolyte of Hoover ended up training the next guy and then the next guy. And so it's this thread that is run for 100 years now. And then to Steve Baker's point, we're looking at Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, and we're saying, okay, go. And we're 3 months in, and we're like, where are the results? Well, in their defense, they're having to deal with 100 years of entrenched philosophy and the way things have been done through the Bill Walsh tree, the J. Edgar Hoover tree, right?
Sort of, but there's enormous power that the director or the deputy director have to bring forward immediate change and do the shock and awe. Like, from my personal experience, right? The Supreme Court case, Navy versus Egan, set the parameters for members of the intelligence community, agencies like the FBI. That it essentially says that those agencies have wide latitude. It's within their discretion. Basically, just handed them a blank check to issue, to suspend, and to revoke security clearances, basically for any reason that they want. So that should have been exercised, and the Stephen Jensens of the world on day one should have had their security clearances revoked. We're not firing you. We just have questions about whether or not your managerial decisions that were made on January 6th or something that could call into question your loyalty to the United States government in protecting and defending the Constitution. We're going to take that under advisement. We'll get back to you in 941 days.
Right.
That should have been done.
Right.
To not just a change at the top. That should have been done. Every probationary employee, like it's a contract. You can be fired for any reason. Every probationary employee is someone who applied to be hired by Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, Christopher Wray's FBI within the last 2 years. Every one of them should have been fired. You can reapply. We don't need cause. You're fired. Those are the things that we would expect from a status quo shattering, paradigm shifting sort of new age of leadership. That's what Dan Bongino talked about for years of doing. And for him, I mean, I find it really hard to believe that Dan Bongino gave up the empire that he had built for himself to go and be the deputy director of the FBI and meet the new boss, same as the old boss. There's something there that I don't understand.
I'll tell you a story, and this kind of, it's the reason why the FBI has gotten by with building the cult. And it's because, and this is largely due to Hoover. I mean, very successfully, he was a great PR guy, and he was able to, well, to start with, you had the old series. I'm old enough to remember very well watching every episode of The Untouchables, with Robert Stack, and that was phenomenal. And then, of course, in the 60s, then we had Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., the FBI, and we had this image of them. More recently, we've had the Netflix series, and that was a great portrayal of the FBI, the on the scientific side of things, where they brought actually into the vernacular of a serial killer. And then my only previous encounter with FBI agents was about before my J6 experience was about 17 or 18 years ago. One of these guys that they professionally go out and they steal domain names, URLs. They hack your account or whatever, and they steal your domain name, and then they sell it back to you on a ransom because it's very valuable. Now, obviously, if they can hijack Microsoft's URL, they're going to get a lot of money for it. In my case, the guy was asking me for I think it was like $1,500 if I PayPal'd him or whatever the exchange platform was at the time. If I sent him $1,500, I'd get my company. It was my music business management company's URL, and he'd give it back. And I told him to F off. And and so I picked up the phone. I called the sheriff's department locally, and then they referred it to the FBI. All right, because it was a interstate crime, maybe international. And so the next morning at 9:00, unannounced, I go to the door, and this is only 17 or 18 years ago. And I go to the door, and there are two guys that look like they walked right off of the the 1960s Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. Playbook of the FBI, of the Hoover playbook back then. They were, they had the black coat and ties on, the white shirt. Everything was immaculately pressed. They showed me their badges and they said, "Yep, we'd like to take a look at and get the because you've obviously had some email exchanges with this guy who has stolen your domain name, and we want to get the what do you call it, the metadata or whatever off of that, and we want to see if we can find this guy." Well, it turned out as soon as they went upstairs to my office and they got on my computer, and within minutes they go, "Oh yeah, we know this guy. Yeah, he's in Arizona. We're close to arresting him anyway." I said, "Okay," and it was very professional. And now when you get the knock at the door and you look through your peephole, they look like they're in a Seattle grunge band. It's not the same anymore,
right?
But it's.
That would have been, off the hearts and minds, but that would have been a great way to get people to accept the fork. Is we're going back to grooming standards, no facial hair, wear a suit in the office every day. I think you would have seen a lot. Well, I wasn't there when I came in, and certainly I took advantage of it fully.
Yeah,
but I mean, look, I can't grow facial hair. I just stay on the face of the franchise, but I dressed casually.
Yeah,
and it actually has a place. Look, if you're going to meet with an attorney, you're going into court. I mean, always suit up. Right. But if I was working on an Indian reservation, it didn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense for me to be out there doing that. So try to dress there that was more appropriate. But I think that does. I've come around to that. At first, I was kind of thinking, no, it's not appropriate. The image of the FBI is the G-man with the suit, right? I mean, it almost should be like a fedora requirement to be out there,
right?
To do it because of
that goes back to the Untouchables, but that was the success that Hoover's FBI had. Is they served us that image of the FBI as not just impeccably dressed, but if you look like that, you're the good guys.
Dress the part.
Oh, they were so, demonstrably presented as different from the crooks. And these were the clean cut guys. These are the good guys. The white hat, not the fedora, but these are the guys. If we go back to the Western days, that rode in on the white hat, with the white hat on.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the image that we had, and they were able to successfully build a culture around that image while they're taking advantage of the fact that people weren't looking close enough at who they really were, especially, once the, especially after the Patriot Act and then accelerated by the Obama administration.
Right. One of the things that Steve Friend is constantly saying, and I just think this is such a great idea, if you were the head of the FBI, Steve Friend, that you would disarm the agency and just make it an investigative situation. I mean, that's just simple, yet because then you would hand over, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. You would then hand over the, the prosecutorial duties to the locals, right?
This is what I would do. The FBI right now, 14,000 agents outside of the major cities, and even in the major cities, when you talk about the ratio of agents to people, it's incredibly small. 14,000. I mean, I worked in offices with like 4 people. Another one had 8 people. So the one I had in Daytona had 8 agents, 4 counties, 1 million citizens, right? So the way you have to augment your manpower is you have a relationship with local sheriff's offices, police departments, and they will give you their person on loan. You'll get a detective. They'll go to the U.S. Marshal. The Marshal will swear them in, deputize them, federal arrest authorities, in addition to the state arrest authorities that they already have. So that relationship, that practice is ongoing. I would enhance that. I would take all of the guns away from the FBI. I would take all the guns away from every single federal law enforcement agency with the exception of a U.S. Marshal for the purpose of courts, prisoners, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then have those agencies all be unarmed. And if they want to do investigative work, they can do that investigative work. Partner with the locals who you've already deputized with federal arrest authority. So if you're going to go and interview someone, you don't want to walk in without a gun if they're a suspect, right? Well, now you have the gun in the room to help you do it. But ultimately, if you're able to say do an investigation like a white collar one where you don't even need to talk to a person, or cybercrime, you're talking about Steve's case, like, oh yeah, we got the metadata, we know where it came from, we've identified our person, boom, we present it to the sheriff. The sheriff can then go and execute that arrest. The sheriff also has the ability to decline to do that and say, look, I'm not going to go forward with this arrest. Now, in the case I laid out there, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But what would make a lot of sense is if, hey, we've got a case, we've done some metadata, we got the cell phone GPS, we got some surveillance footage. There's this woman, and she's sitting outside an abortion clinic praying. We think she's a domestic terrorist. You should go arrest her. And the sheriff would say, yeah, if I do that, I'm going to lose my job in the next election. We're not doing that. Right. So it would incentivize the FBI or whatever the federal law enforcement agency is to actually go after what the sheriff wants them to, which would be the crimes that are afflicting the local area. So ergo, we're assisting our local partners more so at that point. And then Steve and I wouldn't be up at 5 o'clock in the morning waiting on the SWAT team because there wouldn't be the risk of an FBI SWAT team. They wouldn't have one.
Yeah, we wouldn't be up at 5 o'clock in the morning ready to text you so that, Pat, you don't go off on a tangent on something. That's what we're mainly our focus is at 5 a.m. No, what Steve said is exactly right, and it's not just the lady praying in front of an abortion clinic, but if you go back 30 years, there'd be 80, 90 people still alive in Waco, Texas, had that been the including a busload of children. They would all be alive today and grown up and had their families of their own. And this is why I have been advocating. If there was two things that I could change in government, and believe it or not, the Trump administration has basically finally implemented one of them, is that there's two things for years I have advocated. First of all is I agree with Steve on the disarming of the FBI. They should be, and I've always said, we need a federally funded investigative agency because, look, the feds can just put enough money into the science side of being, an investigative agency that we need that. But that anytime that the evidence is now available to execute an arrest, that needs to be turned over to the local sheriff, local law enforcement, because we need that filter, and government's supposed to be local anyway. And that's why I say we would have had people alive in Waco and families prospering there today had that situation been in effect there. Now, the other thing that I just mentioned momentarily ago was that one thing that not the FBI, but the federal government is doing, or that the Trump administration is doing, something I've been advocating for decades in terms of immigration, is that they declare the entire border barrier a military base.
Yeah, we're doing the Roosevelt Reservation, right?
Yeah, because I've been writing about that for 2 decades, probably, that's what needs to happen down there, and it stops. It's over. The problem is over. It doesn't matter if it's 60 yards or 100 yards or a mile. Declare the entire border a military base. Mm-hmm. You don't have to hear about this posse comitatus crap anymore,
right? I had never heard of the Roosevelt Reservation until Interior Secretary Burgum mentioned that last week. I had never heard of that. Explain what that is. It's California, New Mexico, and Arizona. I'm sorry, California, Arizona, New Mexico, that are the first 60 feet,
60 yards or feet or whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay. Is designated, was already federal property. Now we're making it a military base. That's incredible. That's
solved.
Makes sense, man.
I got in trouble because whenever I talk about MAGA or TDS, and I did and I do support the president for a lot of reasons, not just because I got a pardon from him, but I was not a fan of the border wall during his first, presidency, his first administration. Even when he was campaigning in 2016 on the border wall, guess what I was writing about? I was going, no, we don't need to spend 30 or 60 billion dollars on a border wall. We already are spending the money in our Department of Defense. We already have guys already drawing their paycheck And we're fighting in the desert at this time. You know, we got troops all over, you know, the Middle East and the desert. And what better place to train them than down in, you know, Arizona, New Mexico, Southern California, and the border of Texas. This is perfect. It's perfect for the gear. You get to test all, and the sand and all of the weather conditions are emulated down there that you get in the Middle East. And that's what I was saying. Just turn the first. It can be at that time I didn't know about the 60 feet, 60-yard thing, but I just say, like, make the first anywhere from 100 yards to a mile a military base, and that won't cost us anything.
Yeah, and the whole thing of the just being the 3 states and not Texas is based on just when Texas came in. And anyway, what you could do is go to the private landowners in Texas. You're going to tell a rancher, hey, we're going to give you fair market value for this easement, just so we can protect your property from illegals. You don't think that they would sell? Definitely go 60 foot. Okay, I just wanted to get that settled there. But that is fascinating.
I would say that 90% of those ranchers would say, "Oh, yeah, you want
absolutely
you want 100 yards, you want,
and I donate it?
Yeah,
I won't even charge you." No,
right? Because they're tired of their
yeah, exactly
what's happening to them, and the fact that they are under threat constantly by the cartels.
Then they'd probably stand up their own like tattoo parlors and car dealerships right along there, just like that side of the stretch of every single military base. Exactly. You get the economy.
Strip clubs. Oh,
that is awesome. Steve Friend, why do we have the FBI looking for pilots?
This is an interesting question. So there's 3 types of planes that the FBI has. 3 types of pilots. The field offices have many of them have a pilot in command who flies the Cessna up and around for surveillance purposes. So that's an agent typically, and they only fly for 4 hours at a time. So it's a pretty plum assignment. You have the other plane, the other helicopter pilots who work for hostage rescue team, and they tend to be former military pilots, and they come through as an agent most of the time. And then you also have the last stage, which are the larger aircrafts that are maintained in Manassas, Virginia, that fly the director's jet, which is actually supposed to be for counterterrorism purposes, for gathering evidence, or could fly particular personnel. If there's a major disaster, we need to send an evidence response team to it. Like, we'll fly them all down there. Fly overseas with the fly team, which does counterterrorism stuff, evidence gathering. But now there's a request for additional pilots, and I can only gather that is for the deputy director, who has a 20-man protective detail, and it looks like is going to have his own plane.
Start with the 20-man detail. What's the justification for that?
That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, just from I mean, Dan Bongino's not like the typical deputy director who ascends through the bureau as an 1811 criminal investigator armed agent. Mm-hmm. That has historically been how it is. I mean, they were sort of trending to become like an intel analyst, eventually. But an 1811 criminal investigator special agent, that's an armed person. A lot of times they would have a staff of 2 or 3 personal aides. So if there was a protection issue, you would think that 3 guys who are by and large not going into Southeast Washington, D.C., right? They're more of doing the administrative managerial stuff, relatively safe. But Dan Bongino came in, and if I was him, I would have asked for my 1811 designation back and gotten a gun. But he doesn't have that. He perceives that he's under threat. He has security in his private life before becoming the deputy director, and now has put that onus on the FBI to provide. It's a 20-man protective detail, from what I understand, that is on him and family 24 hours a day. And that's 20 additional agents who are not going to be going to do the investigations, or not going to be doing the assistance with ICE with the deportations, not going to be pursuing leads as they come in. It's going to be 20 more people taken away. And that's in addition to the protected detail that Kash Patel has, which I believe is 30, and also Pam Bondi has. So between the three of them, I mean, we're getting close to like almost a full % of the FBI special agent.
Are there actual justifications? Maybe let's talk about Bongino in particular, because he did arrive at the FBI with a certain amount of celebrity that the typical deputy director would not arrive with, and but having said that, Rush Limbaugh didn't have a 20-man security detail, and he's infinitely larger audience than Bongino. Certainly Bongino did not have that then. But then, look, I do understand that once you step into government, and we are seeing it, we are seeing the attacks from the left, we're seeing the violence, we're seeing the attacks on the Tesla dealerships and just people's cars. So I understand that there might be a reason for that, but it does seem excessive to me.
I agree. We're not privy because they're not opening things up. Like, if there is a legitimate threat to life, okay, it's justified. But it's always been sort of this mix-mash of protective details for various principles within the federal government. It's always been a head scratcher to me. I mean, everybody knows Secret Service. Oh, they protect the president. They protect the vice president. Why is the FBI standing up its own protective detail that has a different set of training and a different set of protocols for the FBI director? And then you have protective details that exist for Secretary of State and for all these different cabinet members. I mean, even the Supreme Court justices, they get United States Marshals to do protective detail. I'm not for creating new government departments or government agencies, but it seems to me like we should just rearrange the deck chairs here and have like a protective service. And then outside of that, have a uniform way of carrying things forward. And that way, that the training is all included all together. There's going to be a continuity, a protocol way of doing things, a best practices way,
right,
as opposed to having this just sort of like aggregate way that we do things.
Well, that's one of the things that I've written about, particularly with the Capitol Police as it relates to their relationship with Congress, is ultimately their protective details. And not every Congress member qualifies to have a full-time protective detail or even one person following them around. You have to, ascend to a certain level as a committee chairman or, it's obviously the Speaker of the House, things of that nature. The more high-profile individuals carry a greater security risk, and they are given what they designate in the Capitol Police, this protective detail. Usually they designate them as special agents. And the problem with that is that over the years and the decades of the service that these guys on DPD, Dignitary Protection Detail, is they witness a lot of improprieties. They witness a lot of people getting on Epstein's plane. And all right. And they have to travel with them to the island. And I'm using that metaphorically or as an analogy there because that's what's happening on their international travel is they're seeing who goes in and out of the hotel rooms at night. And so they learn all of this and they learn all of this information, which ultimately makes everything move at the speed of government. And you wonder why. Wait a minute. That guy campaigned on this, with incredible passion, and now he's voting 180 degrees out of phase with his campaign promise.
How are the Capitol Police constitutional? So policing is executive function, right? So the FBI answers to the Department of Justice, which is a department under the executive branch. Same with the U.S. Marshals and the DEA. The Capitol Police answer to Congress, which is a legislative arm. So how are they executing the law there? That seems to me like to be.
I love that question. I love that question.
Well, I mean, the Supreme Court has their own police department.
Mm-hmm.
They have a very, very small police department, but I've been in the Supreme Court and I've seen the chief of police's office, the chief of police of the Supreme Court. Police.
That he's got a cool challenge coin.
Right. And then Capitol Police are, as much as we like to disparage them among the suspendables as being, glorified security guards or glorified tour guides, really, because I mean, many of these guys will spend 20 or 30 years and they will stay a private for 30 years. 30 years. They'll retire as a private. They never ascend to a sergeant or a lieutenant. It's just simply because they don't want the headache. They don't want to take the test. They're making good money. They don't have to put out any extra effort. And so they spend their entire career for 30 years going, yes, ma'am, the ladies' room is that way. And so, yeah. And it's not to say that because they have a lot of specialty divisions. They've got their own CDU units. They've got their own investigators. They've got their own counterterrorism, allegedly. They've got all these different divisions within, and then they've got their traffic control guys. They've got, because they have
satellite offices now.
Yeah. Well, that's another issue. That's another problem down in Tampa for one. But the problem, as I said before, the problem with that particular agency is that they do, in fact, answer to Congress. Now, all these investigations I've been doing into the Capitol Police for the last 4 years, guess which law enforcement agency is not subject to FOIA requests? Capitol Police. Why? They're exempted by Congress. Which law enforcement agency had no body cams on January 6th?
Oh, no, bro.
That would be Capitol Police. Why? Because the Congress members don't want to be seen in offices and back hallways on body cams. So now they're experimenting with body cams, but it's really just on the peripheral guys. So the guys working, the traffic cops, USCP traffic cops are now wearing body cams. So, but they're not going to bring those body cams into the building.
That is incredible.
Ain't happening.
What a fun fact. Okay. And someone who knows the Capitol Police inside and out is you, Steve Baker. And I encourage everyone tuned in here today to check out your professional, I call him the professional liar, Harry Dunn, Capitol Police officer, in J6 involvement. You did a great job with that stuff. And that's at blazetv.com. And of course, you write extensively at theblaze.com. Why don't they just come back? Never mind. I'm just trying to, why do we have to be spread out? I'm going to ask a question of you, Steve Friend, that I ask my military buddies. And I ask them, I mostly ask them, if I'm being honest, during the Biden administration, knowing everything you know now and the way that the military is, would you enlist today? And obviously there's a sea change happening over there, it seems. Of course, just before we went live here, there was it was yesterday, right? I'm sorry, I can't keep up with all my judicial interventions. There's been at least 3 today. But the one I was referring to was yesterday, was the trans thing in the military was stopped. The ban on trans can't go through. Anyway, would you rejoin the FBI today? Like if you, I'm not talking about as Steve Friend, who has been through what you've been through. I just mean like a 20-something-year-old Steve Friend saying, hey, I want to be a part of the FBI. Would you do that now?
So I get asked a similar question when I go to speaking engagements, which I do from time to time by young guys. And I always answer them with this question. Do you want to have the job or do you want to do the job? You want to have the job of being the coolest, most interesting person in just about every room you walk into because you're the G-man and you're pulling down $135K. You have 50 paid days off a year, 3 paid hours a week to work out and work on your mental wellness. It's a plum assignment. If you have to kind of uproot your family, you might have to travel to do that, but it's still really, really enticing. But if you want to do actual law enforcement, you're not going to get it in the FBI by and large. A very small subset, the people that work on like Indian reservations kind of have that experience. I uniquely had that experience. But I have a friend who's another whistleblower, not from the FBI. He was a cop who became an FBI agent. looked around and said he wasn't going to be able to wind up getting close enough to home any time in his career. So he wound up resigning and becoming an investigator for the state's attorney's office in Connecticut. And he was a whistleblower there. But he told me a story about when he was in the FBI, having come from being a police officer, and all the new agents got brought in early in like 6 o'clock in the morning, like they always do. We're going to go out on a big arrest warrant. And they lined up all the new guys up. And an experienced crusty agent comes out and just introduces himself and just going down the line, who are you? And how do you like the job so far? And he said, to a man, every single person, oh, it's the best job, his dream come true. Love it. It's can't wait to be here every single day. He said, he got to me and I go, yeah, it's all right. And the guy paused, looked at him and goes, you were a cop before. He goes, yeah, he was. He goes, not the same, is it? He goes, no, it's not.
Not the same.
Wow. There you go. Okay. Now, one of the things that we do whenever I have you on, Steve Friend, to talk about the FBI is just the absurdities. And many of these are documented on your own podcast, American Radicals podcast. But I have to ask you before we go, can you please talk to us about the man accused of the day before Election Day? We've talked about this. The white supremacists plot to blow up a substation.
Which one?
Yeah, you know what? That's why I slowed down, because I was thinking Election Day. And when I picked this up, I'm like, wait, the day before the election?
So the one that was related to the election was they tried to jerry-rig, like he was an Afghanistan guy who had a son and agreed to enter into a ruse. And the plan ultimately, as it was billed to the American people, if you read the press release or saw the reporting, was that he wanted to blow up polling stations.
Okay.
And he had no capability of doing it, no financing to do it, no predisposition to do it. He's just yet another victim of the FBI playbook, where they find a vulnerable person and groom them and entice them into doing something that they were never predisposed or capable of ever doing. And this is one of the most fundamental problems that we have with the approach to counterterrorism, because the DOJ, you can go to the DOJ, the archives, okay, and I talked about this on the show today on the American Radicals podcast. It lays out how the DOJ perceives entrapment and obscene behavior on behalf of the government, and essentially says it is impossible for us to entrap you. You can't raise that defense.
Wow.
Because the presumption, it turns law enforcement on its head, our criminal justice system on its head, photo negative, because you are not innocent until proven guilty in a national security context. You are guilty until you are proven innocent. And as long as it takes us to poke you and prod you and groom you, if in fact you say, okay, fine, I'll go do the thing, it only proves that for the entire time, which could be years, you were always guilty. And that's the justification they use, which is why over 90% of counterterrorism arrests that the FBI conducts involve someone who was never predisposed or capable of actually bringing out a violent action. They might have bad ideas, but they were never going to do it. And that one there for the election was tremendously disturbing, as are other ones that I've talked about. The Skylar Philippi.
That's the one. That's this
Nashville.
one is.
Nashville.
Yeah.
Skylar Philippi was retarded. He was in communications with a confidential human source, said that he wanted to do a mass shooting at a YMCA. So the confidential human source was in kind of a pickle, because that's not a federal crime. What should have happened was report that up, and we take that to Nashville PD, and they go and engage with that person. But instead, the confidential human source in the employ of the FBI introduced Skylar Philippi to a second confidential human source, who then introduced Skylar Philippi to not one, not two, but three undercover assets for the FBI, undercover agents.
Listen to this, y'all.
Perceived to get Skylar Philippi drunk. And then he suddenly miraculously changed his mind and didn't want to do a mass shooting at a YMCA anymore. He wanted to blow up the entire electrical system for the continental United States of America by taking a 3D printed drone, which he didn't have, and taking 3 pounds of C4 and attaching it to the 3D printed drone, which he didn't have, and flying it into a substation in Nashville, Tennessee for the low price of $150. And when he did that, it would take down all of the electrical systems for the entire continental United States. And he said that he wanted to do it because of the Jews, which made it racially motivated violent extremism, ergo domestic terrorism, ergo Skylar Philippi is in federal prison right now.
Okay, well, two quick things here. Pro tip that Steve has shared multiple times: if someone approaches you, what is it, and they say they could get a crime done for a specific amount, and that matches the amount in your checking account.
If somebody approaches you and agrees with all your worst ideas,
yeah,
and they want to help you bring those to about for the exact amount of money that you have in your bank account. Bonus points if they're only available Monday through Friday. That's a confidential human source. And I mean, and this is new information that you should be aware of and everyone should be aware of. There is now new software the software is called Overwatch that is being sold to police departments, law enforcement agencies around the country that uses AI to penetrate into online space to communicate with people and can actually go to texting if they need to encourage them to do their worst ideas and refer those to
AI entrapment software.
Yes, Wired magazine reported it, and that is not a right-wing source.
That is not a right-wing. So real quick before we leave the whole entrapment idea, now, Mr. Friend, do J6. Is that an entrapment exercise?
No, I have to speculate on that.
Oh, okay.
It is my strong speculation that there was a fair amount of a government arm involved with that, particularly when it comes to the confidential human source, because a CHS, which is the snitch, it's the informant, is not a W-2 employee of the federal government.
Right.
They are only paid by being productive. And by productive, that means giving fresh meat to the government to go after. People who are engaged in wrong think that even though the FBI claims they don't investigate First Amendment protected activity, they do. So we were solicited by the FBI for informants willing to go to January 6th in the lead up to it. So the claim from the Office of Inspector General report was that the FBI said, well, we only had 26 undercovers that were there. They didn't speak to the informants, right, by the way. Or no, sorry, 26 informants who were there. They said we didn't have any undercovers there, which is a joke because they misinterpreted the term undercover because the FBI has an official term of undercover employee, UCE.
Yep. And
that was not the question. They said, did you have any undercover people there? Like, well, no UCEs were officially there, but there were people who were there that work for us that had plain clothes on. So for all intents and purposes, that wasn't undercover.
Yeah, because if they're not UCE and they're just plain clothes, they don't have to answer any questions about it. I don't know. We're not.
No, and then the other avenue of J6 entirely that gets overlooked just because of, I think, pop culture. Everybody thinks FBI. We have an entire department called Department of Homeland Security that has 10 times the budget of the FBI and doesn't have the same guardrails as much as they're outside of them. The FBI still does have Domestic Investigations Operations Guide, the Attorney General Guidelines for Domestic Investigations, both of those, which are supposed to narrow its abilities to infringe on your rights. The Department of Homeland Security doesn't have that.
Right.
And they operate in sources just as well.
Yeah. Just a few minutes ago, Steve Friend, you alluded to, and I want you to, every time you're on, I always want you to share this fun fact. There's a study that says over 90%, what was it, 96%, what was it?
I believe it's 92%. It's from Project Salam. Again, a far left source.
Right.
They conducted a study in 2014, primarily on Muslim counterterrorism cases. And they are just 20 years ahead of the MAGA on this one, right? Because it started after 9/11. Right. And they found that it was somewhere in the area of 92% of the convictions were for people who were neither predisposed nor capable of actually carrying out a violent action furtherance of their ideology.
Right. The domestic terrorism cases, 90-something%, it would not happen without the involvement of the federal government.
And the government only gets involved because the presumption is you were guilty. You were always going to do it.
Oh,
Let's not say involvement. Let's say without the assistance.
the assistance, yes. Steve Friend at Real Steve Friend on X hosts the American Radicals podcast, available on Spotify, iTunes, iHeart. You have a Rumble channel. So much good information all the time shared on the American Radicals podcast. Be sure to follow along with Steve Friend. Steve Baker at Steve Baker USA on X. He is a co-worker of mine over at The Blaze, writes incredible articles and produces incredible little mini docs, I guess they would be called, right? Over at blazetv.com. And you should follow both of these gentlemen's work. They're both just fountains of knowledge in their respective areas. And they're great guys, and I'm so grateful knowing both of you, and I appreciate your time today here on the old Thursday Deep Dive. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and thanks to everyone who tuned in. I appreciate all of your time. Any final words that you gentlemen would like to share here before we part ways?
Well, speaking of the FBI, my most recent story that came out this week is actually, even though its features are my favorite target, Dirty Harry Dunn, former Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn, who was the guy who was proclaimed to have been the hero of January 6th. Literally,
it is awesome to watch him duck behind in between statues and hide from people. And like you said in that mini doc, part 3 thing was couldn't tell if he was afraid of COVID or the protesters. But he was afraid of something that day.
Yeah, but despite his infamy, he has been awarded everything he can get. A presidential medal, congressional medal, book deal. He's been said to be the guy who saved the Capitol. He is everything other than that guy.
Right.
And demonstrably on all manner of video, we're talking about Capitol CCTV videos, DC Metropolitan Police body cams, open source trial videos, all these other things contradict every single thing that he's ever said and wrote about in his book and testified in trials, which of course is called perjury. And so, but the interesting thing about the article, since this was an FBI discussion today, is that my latest article deals with his first 2 FBI interviews. And the big question is between his May of 21 interview, when he gave a positive accounting of his interaction with the 4 oath keepers who stood a line in front of him, actually held more agitated protesters back away from him because he was highly disturbed and he was carrying an M4 automatic weapon, right? So rifle. So they oath keepers, former law enforcement, former military, they recognized a highly volatile situation. They stepped in and de-escalated, and it's all on video.
Man.
And in his first FBI interview, he acknowledged that. And then sometime between May of 2021 and August of 2021, as they're building the prosecution case, the DOJ is against the Oath Keepers, they had a real problem with that statement in his first FBI interview, and they needed him to come back in so they could clean it up.
Oh, gosh.
And that's really the key, is which member of DOJ or FBI or what was happening at that particular start of the roundtable, that who made the decision to bring Dunn back in and feed him a new script to clean that up. And he not only changed his story about his encounter, they actually created an entirely different scenario that took place down in another part of the Capitol in the crypt, which of course on video, we were able to prove never happened.
I tell you, man, there's no justice in this world. Okay, well, I love you both. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And then hopefully, if you beautiful audience have some time at 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, we can hang out here at the Mike Show here on X at Keith Malinak, and we can watch some animal videos together. And that'll kind of, maybe that'll help in the week. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you so much. Follow everything that they do at Real Steve Friend, at Steve Baker USA, and we will see y'all tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Thank you.